just listened to a video by Dr. Robert Duncan, who I think teaches at Harvard, who I somehow have as a friend on Facebook. And he's he's speaking, which is unusual. It's unusual that anybody says anything. There aren't that many people around to say anything. You know? So he was talking about technology, transhumanism, is it the end of the human race, synthetic telepathy. He was talking about neural nets. He was talking about entrainment. He was talking about mind-to-mind links. And what else? I mean, I'm pretty sure he's a professor of neurology, or the mind, or the brain. He's a cybernetics guy and a neural guy. So he combines those two. But he also has said that he's had a hand in the voice of God technology, the V2K technology, and that he's worked on projects for the military. So he's out there, he's doing his thing, but he's also sort of speaking publicly about his work, which is unusual because usually everyone's hush-hush about everything. And the reason everyone's hush-hush about everything is because there's too much of a gradient of knowledge spread across the population. That's kind of why there's a sort of need for hush-hush, but it's not even just that. There are protocols, I'm sure, in the military that say, you can't talk about this, can't talk about that. But I think the major reason is just because across the gradients, if you go further than 3 degrees across, say, a gradient which is represented by say 100, or say 360 degrees represents one full gradient. Okay, if you move 2-3 degrees within that gradient of the spectrum of all possibilities of intelligent thought, then I have a feeling it's going to appear as gibberish. Say from the 1st degree to the 3rd degree, it's going to appear as complete gibberish. And it will be misinterpreted if there's even enough of a pattern for one of the sides to pick up that something is being emitted in the first place. So it's not to me like this thing of it's so suppressed, we're so suppressed, or the military is doing this, or the government, or DARPA, or whoever, the Gwen Towers are shooting mines at me and I can't handle it. Whatever is your beef about this realm, it's not. I think if we can drop the boogeyman, the boogie monster in the closet, hiding behind the scenes and pulling the strings, if we can drop that for a bit and just take an active, open-sided look at it, we will see that it's not that there's a boogie monster hiding in the closet and pulling strings. It's that the universe itself, the existence itself, is so vast that to try to communicate something across the levels, if you are not very similar organically, it's nearly impossible. It would be like going up to a brick wall, which is a form of intelligence, most definitely, and having a a philosophical conversation about Plato's cave for 2 hours and then getting upset that you can't understand what the wall is responding to you. You can't understand what the wall is trying to tell you about Plato and his cave, right? It's kind of like that. Or you can't get pissed off at the government for suppressing the wall's true, expression. You can get mad at the government for suppressing the wall, but it's not necessarily conducive to anything. It's only conducive to helping you feel special. The truth of it, to me, is that none of us is special. Nobody in whatever sort of pigeonhole they've gotten themselves into in this existence is any more special than anybody else. It's all the same shit. Whether you're rich or poor, or you lost half of your limbs, or you're fully a hive mind being now and you have no more illusion of free will and sovereignty, whatever the case, it doesn't really matter. Just the existence is in terms of consciousness, I don't think there's a hierarchy of consciousness. Like, awareness is simply awareness. You can be away from awareness and you can be more in awareness, but as far as like, I'm such a higher awareness than you or whatever, it's harder for the hierarchy to apply itself. And it comes down to words anyway. It comes down to symbology and concepts and patterns. It's patterns. The whole language will dissolve in front of your face at a certain point. The computers are talking to each other in ones and zeros, unless maybe they're using some other language, I don't know. And encoded within the ones and zeros are actual words, and then, you can encode pictures in there, or at least a rough approximation of a picture via pixels, right? Which, once you zoom in enough, you see it's not a picture at all, it's just a bunch of pixels put together. And it depends on the level of magnification for any sense to come through whatsoever anyway. I was reading a little bit of Osho's, one of his books, and he had a story in there about this antique shop owner that was selling an axe, and someone came in and commented on, like, wow, that's a really, really old axe. Where did it come from? And I forget who he said. He said, like, oh, it was Alexander the Great, or it was, Constantine. He named somebody. He named someone back in the day, one of these old farts that's running around chopping people up. And he's like, yeah, it was his. And the guy was surprised because it was so far back, and he was surprised that the axe was still in one piece. And then the antique owner said, yeah, but, the base has been replaced 3 times and the axe head has been replaced twice since then, right? And then immediately that got me into thinking about businesses, businesses, it's like a mental concept that's holding the thing in place, but the people flow in and out through it. And at some point, the business has no people inside of it that it had, 10, 15 years ago. That's certainly possible. I don't know if it's happened. Probably has happened. To where only the placeholder is remaining in terms of identifying this group of elements. And then I was thinking, like, well, if you replace the handle, it's a tremendous thought experiment to imagine taking something off, putting a new piece in. Is the axe the same? you go off the deep end really quickly in terms of trying to mentally entertain what's actually going on. And humans are also doing the same thing because they have cells coming and going all the time. The scientists even say, every 7 years you're entirely composed of different atoms and molecules than you were 7 years ago, and yet you still call yourself by your strawman name or your nickname or whatever. People still know your energetic essence. Does your DNA stay the same? Or is there some sort of invisible pattern holder that the whole physicality gets sort of streamlined through? So we love familiarity, whatever that means. We love it. Okay, the mind, whether it's Don Juan, and his they, whoever they were that gave us their mind, maybe the fallen mind. That's what the story went. That's how the story went. That's how the idea of the mind virus came in. That's at least in terms of putting it into words. But we like, as living beings, we like familiarity. And even if the existence is eternal and there's a constant sort of recycling effect, if you have yourself as a self-known conglomeration of atoms and molecules that's sort of holding in place, then you want something familiar to stay there. Even if your arm gets chopped off and you get a synthetic or a prosthetic arm put on, you don't necessarily feel less of you than you did before that. Does the axe feel like less of himself when his axe handle gets replaced, and then after that when his own head gets replaced and he's no longer the same material whatsoever? Does he still feel like the same axe? I don't know. I don't feel like the same person as I was when I was younger. Maybe it truly is that only the sort of mental identifier that has been applied at you at birth, maybe that is the only thing that's sort of holding your whole thing together, your whole conceptual self. Maybe without that, you would just flow into whatever change came, and the you wouldn't even be a constant. The whole identity thing would be flowing in and out of this body that we tend to call ourselves. And it would probably be something completely different, a completely different feeling. Like, we attach ourselves into the strawman identity, and then the strawman talks to the strawman, and then it becomes boring and robotic. It's kind of what it would look like if there was a whole bunch of organic beings and an AI came in and wanted to invade or something. What would happen? Like, it would overlay their organic intelligence with a bunch of conceptual overlay identifiers due to gross characteristics of the beings, and then the overlays would start talking to each other. Maybe that's what happens, who knows? It's a marvelous sometimes dark. He said that himself. He was wishing to put a positive spin on that which we have come to by this point. And of course, if you're applying it to warfare and targeting people remotely, remote neural viewing or remote neural monitoring, whatever the case may be, whatever is happening, it never feels fun to be being manipulated from afar via some forcing manner, and not knowing why necessarily. But such is life. Sometimes it sucks and sometimes it doesn't. As long as we're here and we appear to have free will, we should be, we should be engaged with the life, however it may present itself. Anyway, thanks again, Robert. If you're watching this, I enjoy your mind, and yeah, brave new world, kiddies. All right, take care. Peace.